Joining us now is Talia Lazarus. Now, Talia has an amazing story to tell and some inspiration for people who maybe have been badly injured and think perhaps they may not be able to live a normal life again. Good morning, Talia.
Morning, how are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Now, let's start at the end of the story and then work backwards. You've set up something called I Got Back Up, haven't you? What is the aim of I Got Back Up?
So the aim of I Got Back Up is to talk to people that have either overcome recovery or a traumatic life event, or even people that are still going through one. So it's not necessarily if you're there kind of at the end yet. And it basically targets people it's to show people that they're not alone. Whatever someone's going through, whether it is a physical injury or disability or not, everybody finds that they feel very, very alone.
Mm.
And the ironic thing is there's a whole world out there of people feeling exactly the same. So what it does is it encompasses that feeling to make you realize actually you're not alone with what you're going through.
All right, now we'll give out website addresses in a little bit, but tell us what set this whole train of events off.
So I was in an accident myself in August 2021. It was a road accident. I was on an electric scooter. I lost control and I hit a bus. I kind of say if you're going to do it, you have to do it in style. um, and this basically led me to not walk for 10 weeks. I had emergency knee surgery in the September, and then I actually had double knee surgery the following February, which was February 2022, so this year. And kind of what I went through, I was 25 at the time, and I think I never thought at 25 years old I was going to have two knee surgeries.
Yeah.
And the thing is yes, it sounds like a physical injury, of course it is, but the mental aspect and the darkness and the places I never thought it would take me to in my mind is kind of where I Got Back Up came from. And kind of, it was a hard time. There was nothing easy about it. It was a roller coaster of ups and downs. Some days were great, some days I couldn't stop crying. And that's kind of where the backstory comes from. And what happened was I started to talk to a few other people that had been through their own journeys and their own stories. And that's kind of where I started to, I related to people, even if their story was so different to mine, I would relate to parts of it and parts of their recovery. And that's kind of where I realized actually, there's something missing, and that is this community, this organization to bring everyone together despite what you've been through. It doesn't matter what you've been through. And like I said, mine obviously focused on a physical injury, but it's a lot to do with how it affects your mind and your mental health. What I realized is, there's a point where you get to where it can be really dark, and that's a kind of a place where you can go one of two ways. You can keep spiraling and you can go deeper and darker and lower, or the harder option is taking that very first step to say, I want to change something. And that's kind of what I want to do with I Got Back Up, is I want to show people that they can have that bit of hope and they can change that bit, because I know I was there and I know how easy it is to just go, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to go deeper and darker and lower.
Yeah, how hard is it? What a few hints and tips, maybe everybody is different, but what do you have to focus on? What do you have to do when you're at that point of thinking, this might never get any better and I don't think it's going to, and so, I'm just going to give up? What would you say to somebody who's in that situation?
So obviously it very much depends on what they're going through, but I think it's a lot to do with it can get better and it will get better, and you have to believe it. And, like I said, it depends on everyone's circumstances, and there are different ways you can do. So, there is, everyday life tasks that you can start to adapt to. So for instance, an example, when I wasn't walking, I couldn't even get a glass of water on my own. And that's a really weird, hard thing to be able to do.
Yeah.
You have no independence. And I struggled with something like that. So how did I change that? I can't say my physio and my surgeon were best pleased, but I started hopping around the house on my good leg, because when I realized, actually, if I just put the crutches to the side and I hopped to the sink to get a glass of water, it gave me that tiny bit of independence, which gave me that tiny bit of hope So, one way is just learning to adapt to different things in your life, and finding different tools. And it's trial and error. You can try a million different things and none of them might work, but just keep going is all I'm going to say. It's one of those cliches, but never give up, because if you just keep going, it doesn't matter how many times, even if it takes 100 times, then that means 101. It could be the time that things change.
Okay, now to give us a bit of a sense, you've set up I Got Back Up, which is this organisation. Give us a bit of a sense of the things you've been doing with that organisation since you set it up.
So I've done a few different things so far. One of them is I've actually launched my own podcast, which is called Getting Back Up With. And what that one does is it talks to somebody on every episode and it goes through their story. It's a range of, there's a lot of different emotions that come through, from very positive emotions, but it also becomes very, it does become quite deep depending on the story. And what that does, it's on video and also audio. So YouTube, Spotify, Apple. And that's kind of a big part of where I'm taking it, because I want to share everyone's story. So, everybody can relate to a different thing. So the podcast is definitely is something that I've been working on. And I release an episode every week. I've also done some work with the television on about disability in sport. So there was a small series about disability in sport and how people with disabilities have used sport to in a sense get back up to their new normal, and how they've changed their life depending on their sport. We have an Instagram, so it's all very new because it was all kind of launched this year, but it's building slowly.
Yeah, and using all the latest new technologies and so on. So that podcast is Getting Back Up With. You can find it on podcast platforms and YouTube, as Talia says. And then there's a website too, isn't there, Talia?
Yes. So the website is called igotbackup.net. And that kind of has everything that we're doing on there as well. Some written articles as well as all the podcast links and just a little bit more information that you can find out about what we're doing.
That's igotbackup.net. Now, give us a sense, Talia, on a scale of 1 to 10, your previous life before the accident being 10, where do you feel like you are now?
I mean, this is a really interesting question, and I'm going to answer with something like 20.
How fantastic.
Yeah, no, seriously. It's a really interesting thing. And, I never thought I'd ever say something like 20. But when I look back on the year and a half or so that I've been through and where I was before and where I am now, for it to take, obviously, something really traumatic and tragic to happen to me, I have changed just every aspect of my life. And yeah, I'd say 20.
Okay, well, that's a fantastic way to end, isn't it? Talia, thank you so much for joining us. Talia Lazarus is the founder of I Got Back Up. It's igotbackup.net, and you can find the podcast by searching your favourite podcast platform for Getting Back Up With podcast. Talia, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.